You think you know when worlds collide, but the ending that shocked audiences was never supposed to exist. A sketch replaced miniatures. Wax planets melted on camera. One flood sequence cost $1,800 and fooled an entire generation. Today, we're exposing 15 hidden truths behind When Worlds Collide, including why George Pal's most ambitious sequel never happened. The ending that was never finished. The final shot of When Worlds Collide is literally a painting, not a matte painting, not a finished special effect, just artist Chesley Bonestell's rough concept sketch. George Pal had originally planned to create the landscape of planet Zyra as a detailed miniature based on Bonestell's design, but Paramount was rushing the film to capitalize on Destination Moon's Oscar success. Time ran out. Money ran out. Pal was forced to simply pan the camera across Bonestell's unfinished sketch and call it a day. If you look closely at the final scene, you can see visible artificial structures in the distance on both the left and right sides of the frame. Those weren't meant to be there. They were just rough notations suggesting an alien civilization. The sketch was supposed to be a blueprint for matte artist Jan DeMille to work from. DeMille never had time to paint the actual landscape. Audiences got a rough draft as their grand finale. The $1,800 flood that destroyed Times Square. The iconic image of Times Square being consumed by a massive tidal wave is one of the film's most memorable sequences. It looks expensive. It looks like millions of dollars in miniature construction and water effects. The actual cost? $1,800. George Pal later explained exactly how they pulled it off. They took a scene from an old Samuel Goldwyn picture and froze a single frame. Then, they built a replica in black of just the buildings visible in that shot. Next, they dumped water from 2 tanks over the miniature. Frame by frame, they used hand-painted mats and rotoscoping to composite the destruction. The entire sequence was created through clever reuse of existing footage, basic miniatures, and painstaking frame-by-frame painting. For less than $2,000, they created an image so iconic that stock footage from it was recycled in other films and television shows for decades. Sometimes the best special effects are just smart budgeting. They melted Earth with a salamander tool. The moment when planet Belus collides with Earth required a unique approach. How do you show a planet being destroyed by gravitational forces? The effects team came up with something brilliant. They crafted planet Earth out of wax. Then, they slowly melted it with an electric salamander tool while cameras rolled at high speed. The wax melted and deformed exactly like a planet being pulled apart by massive gravitational stress. The footage was then composited with a matte painting by Chesley Bonestell, showing Belus approaching. From there, they rotated the frame to make it appear as if Earth was being pulled by gravity into the larger planet. The effect was both scientifically plausible and visually stunning. No CGI, no complex miniatures, just wax, heat, and clever camera work. The scene where the 2 worlds literally collide was accomplished with materials you could buy at any hardware store in 1951. Earthquake sets. Nobody warned the actors. About the earthquake sequences in When Worlds Collide pioneered a revolutionary technique. Instead of shaking the camera to simulate ground movement, the production team built entire sets on wheels and rollers. A giant pile driver was positioned underneath. When triggered, the pile driver physically shook the entire set with real force. This created authentic movement that the camera could capture steady and clear. Here's the shocking part. The actors reportedly were not told when the shaking would start. The production wanted genuine reactions of surprise and terror. So performers would be mid-scene when suddenly the entire floor lurched beneath them. Their stumbling, their panic, their desperate attempts to stay upright were all real. No acting required. Just actual human beings trying not to fall down while a pile driver violently shook the ground under their feet. It was a pioneering method that became standard for earthquake effects in Hollywood for years afterward. Paramount forced. A rush job. Mid-production. George Pal was in the middle of filming When Worlds Collide when something happened that changed everything. His previous film, Destination Moon, won the Academy Award for Best Special Effects during production. Suddenly, Paramount executives saw dollar signs. They wanted to rush. When Worlds Collide into release immediately to ride Destination Moon's coattails and capture the science fiction audience while it was hot. Pal was forced to drastically speed up the schedule. The ending was rewritten and abbreviated. Planned miniature sequences were cut. The grand finale on Planet Zira was reduced to a camera. Pan across an artist's sketch. Pal later said he was so rushed that he had to accept massive compromises he never would have made under normal circumstances. The film that reached theaters in 1951 was not the ambitious epic George Pal had envisioned. It was a compressed, rushed version forced out early by studio greed. Cecil B. DeMille's 18-year dream that never happened. When the novel When Worlds Collide was first serialized in Blue Book magazine in 1933, legendary director Cecil B. DeMille immediately wanted to adapt it. DeMille, famous for massive biblical epics like the Ten Commandments, saw the story as a perfect match for his grandiose style. He envisioned it as a modern religious epic about humanity's apocalypse and salvation. Paramount Pictures, which often worked with DeMille, purchased the film rights and held them. For 18 years, DeMille tried to get the project off the ground, but the timing was never right. By 1949, DeMille was aging and his health was declining. He remained an uncredited executive producer when George Pal finally adapted the film in 1951, but he never got to direct his vision. DeMille died in 1959, having never made the apocalyptic masterpiece he had dreamed about for nearly 2 decades. The film became DeMille's great unmade epic. The sequel, That Conquest of Space, killed. George Pal desperately wanted to make a sequel. The original novel had a follow-up called After Worlds Collide, published in 1934, which depicted the struggle of human survivors building a new civilization on planet Zira. Pal had plans, scripts, and ambitious ideas for bringing it to the screen. But then Conquest of Space was released in 1955. The film was Pal's most expensive and ambitious science fiction project yet. It bombed catastrophically at the box office. Paramount lost massive amounts of money. The studio's relationship with George Pal was permanently damaged. All plans for After Worlds Collide were immediately canceled. Pal would never again have the budget or studio support to attempt such an ambitious science fiction sequel. One failure killed an entire franchise before it could continue. The survivors on Zira would remain frozen forever in that final painted landscape. Their story never told. Recording jet sounds. They couldn't see the sound team needed authentic rocket and jet sounds for the spacecraft launch sequences. They received permission from both the U.S. Army and the FBI to record jet testing sounds at the Lockheed Aircraft Factory in Los Angeles. But there was a catch. For national security reasons, they were not allowed to observe what they were recording. The sound engineers were positioned behind barriers with their equipment running. They could hear the jets being tested. They could capture the audio. But they were absolutely forbidden from seeing the aircraft producing the sounds. Cold War paranoia meant that even Hollywood sound recordists working on a science fiction film were considered potential security risks. They recorded hours of authentic jet and rocket sounds without ever seeing the machines that made them. Classified military hardware became the anonymous star of the film's audio design. Said George Pal to his bride. In 1973, the Rocky Horror Show premiered in London with an opening song called Science Fiction/Double Feature. The song name-checks classic science fiction films from the 1950s. One line became immortal. But when worlds collide, said George Pal to his bride, I'm gonna give you some terrible thrills. When the stage show became the Rocky Horror Picture Show film in 1975, That line reached millions of viewers worldwide. For an entire generation, When Worlds Collide became synonymous with that lyric. Richard O'Brien, who wrote the song, chose to honor George Pal specifically because he represented the golden age of imaginative, handcrafted science fiction effects. The line cemented both Pal and When Worlds collide in pop culture history forever. Decades after the film's release, people who had never seen it could still quote that lyric. Rocky Horror made George Pal's Apocalypse into eternal cult film legend. The 100-foot rocket nobody could miss the spaceship set built for When Worlds Collide was massive by 1951 standards. According to Paramount publicity materials, the constructed rocket measured approximately 100 feet long and 30 feet wide. It dominated whatever soundstage it occupied. The sheer scale of the prop gave the film an authentic sense of weight and grandeur that miniatures alone could never achieve. Actors could walk inside it. Cameras could capture its size relative to human beings. The mile-long launch ramp, designed by Chesley Bonestell, was built on location in Calabasas, California. The ramp swooped dramatically down into a valley before zooming up a steep mountainside, allowing the rocket to gain velocity before igniting its own engines. The actual physical construction of both rocket and ramp gave When Worlds Collide a tactile realism that impressed audiences and influenced future science fiction films for decades. Sometimes size really does matter. Star Trek's Secret Tribute. In 1982, Star Trek II. The Wrath of Khan included a subtle homage that only hardcore science fiction fans would notice. During scenes set in the Genesis cave, 2 cargo containers can be clearly seen in the background. Their labels read Bellis and Zyra, the names of the rogue star and planet from When Worlds Collide. The containers serve no plot function. They're not mentioned in dialogue. They're simply there as a loving Easter egg from director Nicholas Meyer and the production designers. The Genesis device, which could terraform dead planets into living worlds, thematically echoed the premise of When Worlds Collide, where survivors must start fresh on an alien planet. The container labels were Meyer's way of acknowledging that debt to George Pal's pioneering vision. For 31 years, Star Trek quietly honored the film that helped establish the template for humanity, escaping doomed Earth to start over elsewhere among the stars. L.A. Confidential's period-perfect detail. When Curtis Hanson directed L.A. Confidential in 1997, he obsessed over period accuracy for his 1950s set noir. One small detail demonstrates that commitment. In a scene where tabloid writer Sid Hudgens arranges a publicity stunt arrest of a young actor on drug charges, the location matters. The arrest happens on the night of a movie premiere. In the background, an abandoned bank building at 5620 Hollywood Boulevard was redressed as the fictional El Cortez Theater. The marquee reads When Worlds Collide. The accompanying headline states, Movie Premiere Pot Bust. The scene is set in 1953, 2 years after When Worlds Collide's actual premiere. Hanson chose that specific film because it represented exactly the kind of spectacle Hollywood was producing and promoting during that era. Stuart Whitman's forgotten debut actor, Stuart Whitman, who would later become a major star and Oscar nominee, made his screen debut in When Worlds Collide. He's listed in the cast credits under his nickname, Kip Whitman. His role was so small that film historians have had difficulty confirming which background character he actually played. Some sources suggest he appears in the riot scenes outside the construction camp as one of the desperate lottery losers trying to storm the rocket. Others claim he's visible among the workers building the spacecraft. Whitman himself rarely discussed the role in later interviews. Within a decade, he would star in major films and earn an Academy Award nomination for The Mark in 1961. The volcano that appeared in every George Pal film. When Zyra makes its close pass and wreaks havoc on Earth, one disaster shot shows a volcano erupting. The side of the volcanic peak falls outward in a dramatic collapse. That exact same shot appeared in multiple George Pal films. It was recycled in The Time Machine in 1960, showing the distant future Earth being destroyed. It appeared again in Atlantis. The Lost Continent in 1961, depicting the destruction of the legendary island civilization. Pal's production company kept reusing successful effect shots across different films. Why spend money creating new disaster footage when you already owned perfectly good footage of catastrophic destruction? In the days before home video, audiences wouldn't notice or care about the recycling. From unfinished sketches passing as final effects to wax planets melted with hardware store tools, when worlds collide pushed creativity beyond its budget. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment with your favorite apocalypse movie, and subscribe for more deep dives into the science fiction classics that changed everything. See you in the next one.